Most people think getting rich takes a big moment, a perfect stack pick, a big business, a big inheritance, and well, I didn't have any of that. In fact, I'm just a regular guy with a regular 9 to 5, and these are the 10 tiny habits that quietly made me a millionaire. Now, the first habit is to stop listening to broke people. Now, listen to me. If someone is drowning in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and still giving you financial advice, please stop listening to them, because these are the same people who say, oh, you only live once, yeah, YOLO. And while they say that, they also make decisions that guarantee that they will struggle forever. Now, you wouldn't take fitness advice from someone who has never been to a gym. So why take money advice from someone who is not only struggling, but it's also broke financially and sometimes mentally and spiritually? These are the same people who will work at Walmart when they are 70, not because they want to, but because they have to. Believe me, I am in my 40s. You do not want to be there. And by the way, nothing against Walmart. I love Walmart. In fact, I have purchased Walmart stock in the past. When I stopped listening to broke people and I started listening to people who were wealthy, people who were doing well in life, people who had more than I had, or at least had the things that I was aspiring to have, then I was able to apply and to learn the second habit that I'm going to share with you. I started paying myself first. Look, when I got paid, I didn't wait to see what was left to save or invest. Instead, what I learned is I took my money out first. That is before rent, before food, before fun. Now, keep in mind that back in the days, I was spending everything that I was making. Now, I am an engineer and I had a really, really good job that was paying me a lot of money back then. And I was only 23 years old and I was almost making 6 figures. But I was blowing it away because I had no financial discipline. At the same time, what I realized is that I didn't necessarily have to have extreme financial discipline, because I could automate my savings and investments and make those withdrawals the minute my paychecks hit the bank. That made me spend less because I felt that I was making a lot less. I mean, every time I look into my checking account, I would see I have a lot less money than I did before. So I unconsciously adjusted my life to live on less than I was making. I know, brilliant. No, but it really is a mindset hack. Look, the next habit that helped me become a millionaire was to question everything. Now, let me explain. You buy a house, list a new car, spend more when you earn more. That's what most people do, right? But I started asking myself, why? Why am I doing this? Who told me this? Questioning the default is how I stopped doing what keeps most people stuck. I hear people say, well, you gotta buy a house, you gotta step up. And then I ask myself, why? Does that make sense for me? Did I run the numbers? Can I afford this comfortably? See, you have to question your own mind and think about where you're getting that information from. Is it from a wealthy person or one of your broke friends? And we all have them. Now, to question everything, you really need to develop the next habit, which will not only help you at work, but it will help you build more wealth. And that is simply the habit of thinking critically. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's smart, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's good for you. And if you don't believe me, take a look at some of these dumb trends on TikTok. I mean, should you follow them? Probably not. Now, what worked for me was to stop copying what broke people were doing and started studying what wealthy people actually did. And that requires doing something that a lot of people are just not willing to do these days. That is to start thinking for myself. And in fact, it sometimes required me to do the opposite of what everyone around me was doing. Let me give you an example. In 2008, the stock market and the real estate market crashed, and it crashed bad. I had an extra $1,000 and I decided to buy a few stocks. This was a little bit of an experiment that I wanted to run because I had that extra cash. I said, I wonder how much this stock would appreciate over time after this crash. How long would it take to recover? Well, today I'm going to show you one of my holdings that I bought back then. Now, these stocks have appreciated by over 400%. So when everybody was saying sell, 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 I was like, buy, even if it's only $1,000. Now, the truth is that I wish I had more money. I probably would have bought as much as I could, and I probably would be worth a hell of a lot more than I do today. The next habit is really critical to your financial future, and I see so many people avoiding this, and that is simply facing reality. That's right, face reality. A lot of people sit around and complain about the economy, the taxes, their employer. Now, I know for a fact that these things do have an impact, but in many cases, what I see is that it is our habits that are keeping us broke and not the economy or some government. No, these things influence, but they're not the determining factor. And if you want to believe that, you'll always be broke. You'll always be poor, because that will keep you thinking that it's the man, it's something out there that controls your life. Believe me, that's not the case. Now, when I was younger, like a lot of people, I avoided checking my bank account. I mean, in fact, it made me anxious and nervous every time. I was avoiding reality, and the reality was that whenever I looked at that checking account, it was a harsh reminder that I was overspending and that I was really living paycheck to paycheck, even though I was making almost 6 figures, and at some point even 6 figures, and I was still living paycheck to paycheck. How could that be? I was making more. Well, that was my reality at the time, and I just simply didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to admit that I was living above my means. And just to be clear, avoiding problems and avoiding your reality will never help you, will never solve your problems. But for me, the day I sat down and faced the numbers was really the day that I started taking control. The next habit is life-changing, and I don't think many of you will like this, but it will change every area of your life. I stopped watching sports. Look, I know, controversial. I still like and sometimes love a good game. I mean, hell, I even got tickets to the Soccer World Cup games for next year, but I used to watch everything, every game, every weekend. Eventually, what I realized is that I was spending hours watching other people, other men chase their dreams while I was sitting on a couch talking about my team, when in reality I was stuck. Look, your team winning the Super Bowl this year is not going to change your life in any meaningful way. Trust me. And by the way, all the useless knowledge that we gather from playing fantasy football is also not going to change our lives, and it's certainly not going to be useful for anything other than losing money every year, unless you're the winner. But let's get serious. Look, the reality is that you can balance watching your games every now and then, but if your life is all about the game, my team, believe me, that is not going to change your life. And if you know your team more than you know your bank account, I'm going to suggest that there is a problem in your life. The next habit is very important, and that is delay gratification on big purchases. Now, if I wanted something expensive, I didn't buy it right away. I waited a week, maybe 2. Usually by then, I would have enough time to ponder the decision, and more often than not, I would simply realize that I didn't need the thing that I was trying to buy. Yep. A lot of time, if you just wait a day or 2, you'll realize that you really don't want that thing anymore. I do this a lot with Amazon. I put things in my Amazon cart, and unless I need something right away, I just put it in there and let it sit. These are the sorts of tricks that allow me to keep my money and really keep control over my emotions. A lot of us are just too impulsive, and we want to get those dopamine hits from buying something new, the excitement of getting something new. But oftentimes that leads to not taking control over your purchases and simply buying things that you don't need. The next habit is foundational to wealth. I don't care how much money you make. If you can't develop this habit, you will never have a penny. Trust me. I stopped letting raises and income increases become an excuse to spend more. Now, this is what is popularly known as lifestyle creep. Most people get a raise or a new source of income and immediately upgrade their lifestyle. I stop and I don't do that anymore. And it's easy to fall into these traps because you'll say to yourself, hey, you know what? I deserve it. I got a raise. I deserve a new car. So you go get yourself a new car, or maybe you sell your house, you get a bigger home. It sounds like a good idea, but it's not. In fact, I remember talking to a friend many years ago, and he moved to a department where he was making a lot of money. Everybody was making a lot of money. And I remember him buying a BMW. Now, I don't really like BMWs, but they're nice cars. I asked him, hey, how come you got a BMW? Because the car you have seems to be working, seems to be fine. He said, well, look, everybody in this department has nice cars, so I need to have one. So he said, I can't be the one with an old car. I'm like, what? Who gives a damn what these people in your department think about your car? Look, to build wealth, you need to create a gap between what you make and what you spend. If you buy new toys every time you make more money, unfortunately, you'll never be rich. You'll never be wealthy. The next habit is what truly made me a millionaire. And this is something that takes time. It's hard to program your brain for this, to think this way, but I just play the long game. The truth is that there are no shortcuts. Investing is like watching paint dry, slow and steady. By the way, I gotta give credit to Ramit Sethi for this phrase, but it is true. Good, consistent investing is boring. Now let's look at what happens when you invest $1,000 for 5 years and assume that your returns are 8%. Look at what happens over time, and let's look at year 30. At year 30, I know you're thinking, well, 30 years, well, let's just assume you never make any more investments. It's just $1,000 that sits there. And at 30 years, this would be worth $10,000. That is the power of compounding interest. The more time you let your money work for you, the harder it works. Now, assume you can invest $500 additional dollars each month. I know it's a lot, but let's just make the assumption that you can throw $500 each month. So now you're compounding larger amounts, and here's what happens. After 20 years, you have almost $300,000. But look at what happens at year 30. The amount is now $756,000. Now take a look at this. It took you 20 years to get to $300,000, but it only took you half the time, 10 years more, to double or more than double your money. That is the power of time in the market and compounding interest. The truth is that building wealth can be a fast process, but for most people, normal people like myself, it just takes time and discipline. The discipline to build the right habits, the right processes, and the right mindset. Now, if you want to know how you can become a millionaire with your 9 to 5, no side hustles, watch this next.